these different things. Yeah, it's like, and then you can talk about the church's monopoly on things, but I mean, even then, I was revisiting the Cave in the Light, that book about Aristotle and Plato, and they talked about how the Crusades, even though they were a disaster in terms of lives and they didn't succeed what they wanted to do, they really bridged the culture kind of to the East, because people in the West are like, wait a minute, these people have silk robes, they have these nice spices, they have all these things, we want some of those things. So certain European vassals started allowing Jewish and Muslim scholars to sort of sneak into their places. Like Aquinas' father actually did that, even though technically he wasn't supposed to. But then it's like, you had the church saying, okay, officially we're banning Aristotle, but no one really listened. So there were these divisions. And then, of course, Luther, the Reformation, the church split into a million different factions, not literally a million, but you get what I mean, all these different churches and things. So, and then, of course, in this country, you can talk about hostility to different immigrant groups, and they become assimilated. New groups, there's hostility to them. So it's like there's never been this one unified narrative. People who say oh, we were unified, now we're divided. It's like we've never really been unified. Which, however you look at it, it's just you're more aware of the divisions because you're living through them, and they show up in a different way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's about the nature of history. In history, you only hear about the notable things. What was notable? Yeah. You hear about the big wars, the big schisms, when there was a famine for a long time, or when some people came in and there was a massive protest. You hear about that. That's how it is. Historically, in the past, you'd hear about the summer of protests, of riots, but you wouldn't hear about just the individual ones that spark up for a few days because some person got shot somewhere. But now you're on Twitter, and every other day there's something trending where you're seeing all this activity of hundreds of people. And as I mentioned before, our capacity of actually keeping people in mind is 100 to 150 people. So if every day we see on social media thousands of people arguing about different topics that come up, it might seem like that's 10 times more than the amount of people were genetically used to being able to actually hold in our brains. So it seems like there's 10 times more people. But in history, we don't hear about the equivalent when it was these people in this neighborhood that had some issue for a few weeks. They were just having a small skirmish out there. That wasn't written down in history. But now we're getting every single one. It seems to be like a constant thing. So it seems, the perception seems to be a lot more. But the things they're fighting on are definitely nowhere close to that level. Like somebody fighting for more representation in Harvard, like getting the number of Black people in Harvard white people all around the country. That's a whole different battle, but people are trying to act like those are the same things when it's clearly not the same. Not the same animal at all.
No. All right. Anything else or?
Yeah, there was something here. Just again, we're talking about I'm trying to think of why some people seem to be on edge. Now again, I'm saying seem to be on edge because historically I don't have the time to go back and talk to the average person. But I have some comparison and something I came up talking with Adam as we were pointing out how he pointed out something with the boomers in the United States of America, how they have certain tensions. And he made a good proposition that they might be the part of the ones who were most, they were talking about how, with this pandemic, the kids have to sacrifice that for us. That we have to shut down the schools because you might kill grandma. And that actually worked. And the boomers, they vote at different levels. With historically, the older people in society seem to be much more willing to sacrifice their general safety for the sake of society, yet that seems to be something different with the boomers. And I was talking about the American dream and the perception. So instead of first world problems, it's more like a first world perception thing. So what is part of the reason why people perceive certain things? Because these aren't necessarily first world problems that they're talking about. Like the pandemic, for example, is a global thing. The same bug is here in Kenya as it is in the United States of America. But why do people in the United States of America react to similar numbers, similar death numbers, similar threat in an entirely different way? And that's entirely a perception thing rather than a practical thing. The climate in the world is changing. But why do Americans or first worlders, a specific subset of first worlders, seem to react to it in a different way? Some of the people are like, we need to worry about this in this future time. But it's like, hey, you think the world's going to end in 10 years. So why are you worrying about what's going to happen in 30 years? But besides that point, that perception, and I was sticking with that. You look at the children, you look at the children, that song is stuck in my head now.
Oh boy.
But selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. You're talking about OxyContin. You're talking about these things with the dopamine things. A lot of people abuse these drugs in college. A lot of kids have been to college. A lot of millennials and Gen Z and people like that went to college, have been using these drugs. A lot of people are antidepressants and all these things. It's been found to be certain parts of it are actually in the water. So people have different sensitivities to things. Some people might have a lick of just a bitter shellfish and swell up. Some people might need to eat like an entire shrimp platter and then they'll swell up. So just having minute aspects of water, of these drugs, these antidepressant drugs in the water, and people drink water a lot daily, that could accumulate to different people's sensitivities. And then an additional thing, a lot of people go to work, there's a lot less stay-at-home mothers anymore. It's advised that you're supposed to have 6 months to begin with of just breastfeeding with newborns. Most Americans don't do that anymore. I think in my estimation, they'll go off of formula, or the mom will be back to work and things like this. So these things could just be, we could be kind of different animals when it comes to our brain chemistry, and just messing up some of these things and making certain people just be more prone to just freaking out about certain things. When these systems that were set in, you're supposed to have these endorphins that rush to actually do something, then it has an outlet, because it seems to be, you get that feeling and you see a confirmation in reality of why that feeling was there. But now people get those feelings and there's no confirmation, so people feel they might have missed something, and it just kind of just gets that system off of whack. I'm trying to understand kind of where that kind of falls in.
I mentioned it with Adam, and I think I've mentioned it in different shows we've done about how all the social justice stuff has a reverse cognitive behavioral therapy effect. And I think the challenge with this is that people are looking for meaning in life, so they see themselves as like heroes fighting for oppressed people. And also it's a system that explains the world. Again, like the religion we're talking about, it gives you explanations. This is why this exists. This is why this is a problem. So people are drawn to that for that reason. But unfortunately, at the same time, as I've mentioned several times, I mean, it has the reverse cognitive behavioral therapy effect. It teaches people to catastrophize. It teaches people to think in black and white. It teaches people to assume the worst about general groups of people, on and on. And the fact that these ideologies enshrine all these habits as virtues, it just creates a lot of dysfunction. It's a downward spiral. And that's why I think a lot of people who buy into this stuff are constantly posting about how depressed they are, how it's the worst, oh, we live in such bad times, all this. And they don't realize that these are self-inflicted wounds, because they're drawn into it because it gives them answers to how the world operates and maybe gives them a purpose, but they don't see how destructive it is simultaneously.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think I agree. In general, these are not happy people.
No.
And I would not be surprised to see, like, as we see a lot of these situations where there's a mass shooter, there's somebody who's been found to be violent, somebody's in an instant altercation with a policeman where they seem to be acting a fool, then they get shot, they get harmed, and things like that. Often you find these people are often on SSRIs, and different people have different proclivities and tendencies. Some people go more to violence, and I think with some social justice warriors, whether it be going back to the past to when the more religious right had more of a stronger sway in society, or current with the progressive left and things like that, some of them are committing some forms of, they even come out and say, we're out here to destroy these aspects of society. We have to tear down society. They're committing societal violence. There is a form of violent activity, destructive activity they're going in. I would not be surprised to find that there's a higher propensity, a higher percentage compared to the general public of the people that are very active out there in their activism that are also on SSRIs. I would not be surprised to find that instead of direct violence, they're more like proxy violence and more like societal violence, mental violence in that kind of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it many times that it's not super empirical. It's just kind of my observation. But every person I met like this either has issues with anger, anxiety, depression, some combination. Like, I've never met one of these people who's like sincerely a happy, like, loves life kind of person. Like, if there are, I'm willing to see them. But given the stuff that Jonathan Haidt, given the stuff that Haidt and Luke Yanoff talked about with reverse CBT, it makes sense why they'd be like this. Like,
Yeah. Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.